Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nicole Upton. I'm Ingenuity's Director of Partnerships and Professional Learning, and I'm here with my colleague.
Hello all, my name is Courtney Cintron, Ingenuity's Partner Engagement Specialist. Happy to see you all this morning.
And we are so grateful that we have a whole team from the CPS Department of Procurement here with us today. We're being led by Jasmine Banks, and I'll introduce her further in just one moment. But we have heard from a lot of you that, CPS procurement can be kind of mystifying, that there's a lot of ins and outs and a lot of words and things that we're all having to deal with all the time. So this session is really aimed at helping you kind of sort through some of the details and demystify some of that 101 procurement CPS lingo. I do want to note that although the CPS Arts RFQ, the Arts Partner RFQ is a coming up deadline of the 30th of October, this session is not meant to be an info session specifically for that RFQ. Certainly you'll learn things about the RFQ in general, but this is really a broader take at some of the questions that you have about procurement itself. I know if you log onto the procurement website and look at the bid for the CPS Arts Partner RFQ, you'll find some previous info sessions that were led, as well as some FAQs that will get more into the nitty-gritty of everything. Okay, so without further ado, we've got some time together today. I'm going to introduce Jasmine Banks, who is the category buyer at CPS Procurement and has been working with us on planning this. You've got a whole team of friends with you, Jasmine, so welcome to you and everybody from the procurement team.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to virtually meet everyone. Again, my name is Jasmine Banks. I'm the category buyer here in the CPS Procurement Department, and I brought some friends along, so I was just wondering if we could do a quick introduction to everyone.
This is Carla Shaw. I am the compliance specialist with the Office of Business Diversity at Chicago Public Schools.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kenyatta Dabney, and I am the Director of Background Check here at Chicago Public Schools.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Corey Bijou. I'm the Accounts Payable Manager here at Chicago Public Schools.
And I'm Ellen Lorden. I work in risk management, and my job is to buy insurance for the Board of Education, as well as to assist vendors with what insurance they need.
All right, thank you so much. And I think we could start now. So one of the most frequently asked questions we get here at CPS is how to become a vendor. And I'm here to tell you that there are two ways that you can become a vendor with CPS. The first route is to be brought on under a contract, and the second route is to be brought on under a sponsorship. Under the contract is pretty much where you would just submit to one of our contracting opportunities that we have available to the public. In the sponsorship way is to be brought on under a sponsorship by either a school, network, or department. So the first contract option here is where you will just follow up on our CPS Procurement's website. We also do outreach opportunities for all of our opportunities that we have for the public. But if you want to sign up to get further information about, where to go to see what CPS has out there, you would simply go to our CPS/procurement website, which is here. I have two screenshots here just to, make it easier on the eyes. If you go to the one on the right, this is our home page for procurement. You would go to our contracting opportunities here where it says open to the public. You would click current contracts, and it will look a little bit as to what's on the left side. So here where it lists the list of everything that we have currently out to the public. If you're interested in any of the opportunities, you will click the date, and that is where you will, register to be able to download the documents that is required for what's being asked for. Now, our next slide is the sponsorship option. So if you're interested in working with CPS and you don't necessarily see a contract that we have available, but you want to offer your services to our schools, districts, or networks, and they see that, they want to use your services, this is where they would initiate a sponsorship for your company. Please note that in order for this to start, it has to be brought on by CPS. The vendor cannot start the sponsorship without CPS initiating it. And also please note that you're not allowed to start any work without the sponsorship being fulfilled and you have an approved PO. So we get a lot of questions as to what is the benefit to being a contracted strategic source vendor. Although you can continue to work with the schools without a contract, the benefits of being a strategic source vendor is that it's basically district recommended. All of our schools, networks, anytime they're looking to do some type of scope of service, they will go to our contracted source, strategic source vendors first. So you have increased visibility. We have a marketplace where they go to see, you know, like who's performing these services at this time. We have a list of vendors that they could, you know, could follow up on to see who's actually doing the services for us currently under contract. And also, you're not limited by the spend limit when you're not on a contract. I will cover that in a few seconds here regarding our spend limit. So our tier status, this is a hot topic now since we are remote learning at this time. Our tier status is pretty much any organization that's providing free or fee-based services to CPS during our remote learning time. Here I have two links where if you want to know like frequently asked questions that we currently receive about the process or the status tiers, you can click on this link here to get the frequently asked questions. And I also included the policy website as well. Okay. So what is the acceptable use policy? It is to ensure the health and safety of our students and families during the remote learning times. We offer 3-tier statuses when it comes to working with our students. Tier 0 is basically interaction between the vendor organization and CPS students and families is not permitted. Tier 1 is our remote learning partner where you could work with our CPS staff and students, and Tier 2 is our core partner status. I attached a link for the vendor training webinar in case you want to get walked through it step by step. This is a very helpful webinar to go back to. And on our next slide, I pretty much just have a screenshot of just how it flows so you know the functionalities of what you can and cannot do. So again, Tier 0, you can talk to CPS staff, but again, you're not allowed to talk to the families or the students. Tier 1 and Tier 2 is where you have permission to do both. Okay. Now, do we have any questions so far?
Hi, Jasmine. So we do have a question in the chat. Before we get to that, let me just start off with a clarifying question around the Arts Partner RFQ. So some people call this thing the RFQ, some people call it a contract, some people call it an SSV or a strategic source vendor. Are we talking about the same thing when we use those phrases?
So the RFQ is pretty much the same thing. If you're going to get awarded for this, you will be a strategic source vendor because you'll be under contract for participating with the Arts RFQ.
Great.
So it's pretty much the same thing, and essentially it's different because an RFQ is just the title for the service that we're doing, which I will cover.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We've got a question here, Jasmine, about how a partner would get access to the form for principals to approve a tier change status.
Okay, so in order to get a tier, Carissa, do you have a clearer answer for this?
Yeah, I do. So if you're interested in a tier change status, what would need to happen is you need to work with a department or a school, and that department or a school will request a tier change for you, and then that's how the process is initiated, and you'll be emailed the forms to complete.
So it sounds to me like this is a form that principals should know and have access to already. Is that right?
No, not necessarily. So what happens is they would work with the procurement department, and there's a process to go through internally. Who initiates it, kind of like a sponsorship, is the principal or a department lead.
Okay, great.
So
So
just
it
to
sounds to me,
yeah. I was just going to say, so just to clarify, that means that the partner would have to request that the principal contact procurement.
Exactly. Only a department or a principal can request a tier change for a vendor.
great. Thank you. That's helpful. We've got another question here about the differences, I think, from a kind of philosophical level of between tier 1 and tier 2. What makes a vendor a quote unquote core partner? And I've got some of my own thoughts on this too, but I'd love to hear from you, Jasmine.
Okay. Tier 1 and tier 2. So the core partnership, again, Carissa, I'm going to have to lean on you for this one again, because this one is a bit out of my range. Sorry.
No worries.
I think the biggest difference is just the level of access. If you want to go back to that slide really quickly, where we actually detail the differences. And then I also want to note, it's actually listed on our website as well. And so what you can do is go to our website, every vendor can, and take a look at that graphic that Nicole is pulling up. And then also, there we go.
Okay.
And then also look at the presentation. There was actually a fairly thorough presentation that was given of the whole tier process. So if you look at it, tier 1, that's where you actually can communicate with the students over email.
Yes, and the core partner, it looks like you have one-on-one.
Yeah, you can have the one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
whereas you have just a group of students, I believe, for tier 1.
And you will receive the vendor CPS email.
And just to give some additional background, I know in my conversations with Julia at the CPS Department of Arts Education, she's really encouraging that partners think about being a tier 1 partner. A tier 2 partner actually has a lot more liability wrapped into it because you're meeting with students one-on-one. And many of you probably don't need that status. That tier 1 is likely what you really need to get your programs done. So tier 2 just requires a little bit more a lot more probably security and some barriers to getting that. So I know, again, the DAE was really thinking about encouraging partners to look at that tier 1 status. So we've got another question here from Juliet about the requirements for no-cost partners. So as I understand it, Carissa and Jasmine, no-cost partners also need a tier status, correct?
Well, to do work during remote, you will need, to at least be tier 1, right?
Yep.
But typically, as a no-cost vendor, the only requirement is you need to be able to, find a school that would sponsor you to actually do the work. So most of our no-cost service vendors need to be, sponsored by the schools in order to enter into those agreements. And you need to be sponsored by a department or a school. But right now, while we're in this remote phase, you would need a tier to continue your work this year.
Great. And I know, I believe that no cost agreement, do we go into no cost agreements a little bit later in the presentation?
We don't.
Okay, I'm wondering, I know that the last we heard, there was still not an update on the no cost agreements for the 2021 school year. I'm assuming that's still the same, and that is still pending for partners. Is that right?
I believe so. I just need to check on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we'll see.
Again, it's kind of like the tier. So if you find a relationship with a partner in a school, the person who leads that no cost agreement execution would be the principal or the department that you're working with.
Okay, great. And I can say, Christina, who asked that question, I know when those are available officially, Ingenuity will help signal boost and share that information as it becomes available.
I don't believe we share the actual agreements, but we can just share that they're available.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, so another question is just when, let's say you go through this tier status, you get the approval, the principal sponsors you for a tier 1 or a tier 2, if you're granted that tier 1 or tier 2, how do you get that email? What is that, or is there a process that kind of rolls out to help you understand when that email address comes?
So I actually had this, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jasmine. Go ahead.
I've had this situation, I think, recently, and what happens is the department that you're working with should initiate that email for you.
And they would request it from our ITS department.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the running theme that I'm hearing here is the principal has to initiate all of these movements with the Department of Procurement on your behalf. That's kind of, we're repeating that over and over again.
And so when we talk to our principals about it, there's like a little checklist of the process flow that we, share with them so they know how, all the various stages of the process. It's good for, that our vendors and our partners are expressing this interest as well, but we also give those explicit details to our principals.
Great, thank you. We've got another question, and then we're going to move on to the next section to make sure we can get through all of this. This one is about virtual field trips and performances to virtual kind of performances. And where does that fall into the acceptable use policy?
I think that's something that I need to follow up on it. I'm not
that's
sure where that falls in AUP. I would think that would be a tier 1, but I definitely need to validate that with our arts director.
Yeah, and I'm also certainly verify with DAE. I'm also guessing that that's a tier 1 because you're likely still having to coordinate that with your teacher and your partner school itself. So that's likely falling under tier 1. Tier 2 would be something kind of different. I think tier 1 would likely cover that, but we can follow up with that for sure. Okay, if we haven't gotten to all your questions, keep them coming. We will have another opportunity to follow back up with some of these questions. But let's move on to the next section. And again, as we go through this section, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we can try to address them for you.
I think the slide introduces Ellen for the risk department.
Sorry, I was busy looking down, taking notes from all those tier conversations. My name is Ellen Lorden. I have the sun in my face. If you don't mind, I'm enjoying it, even though you can't probably see me. Our insurance process really kind of mimics what I do on behalf of the Board of Education. I'm one of the people who attempts to purchase insurance to protect the board's assets. And its most important assets, its students. And then secondarily, the money. And therefore, we really don't care what kind of vendor you are. We care what your risks are. So if we pay you a lot of money or you're no cost and you just donate your services, or you are usually a location where students might visit, but right now you might just be via Google Meets in a visiting location or for a performance. All of those things kind of wrap up into what makes an active vendor. So similar to what Jasmine went through, vendors either go through the solicitation process, which is very simple on this flow chart. Solicitations encompass the entire process of creating an RFP to go to market, to select vendors, to onboard them. And all solicitations will include insurance requirements, and they will be included upfront in the solicitation. So you know what you're getting as a requirement when you agree to respond to it. It doesn't mean you have to buy the insurance in order to get selected. It means you need to document that you're willing to buy it or you have questions about it. So It's spelled out in the solicitation, and then the process eventually leads to all solicitations will go to the yellow box. Risk management hires a third-party vendor who monitors all 4,500 active vendor insurance certificates. And therefore, you know, on a separate website, you'll file your insurance and then you will become activated. If you go the route on the left, where a school or department has sponsored you, then you will receive an application. You will complete it. It has a bunch of questions. So, things such as, will you have contact with students? And the contact with students definition, as we all know in this day and age, online contact is the same risk as being in person. And if I were to look at the tier statuses, those were the kind of notes I was taking to myself. Tier 0 are vendors who are probably active right now, however, aren't actually working with students right now because they're not at the level of tier 1. The tier 2 level has more to do with supervision. If you're a tier 1 level, you are with the CPS employee at all times, even though it's virtual. If you're a tier 1 level, and hopefully I gave these, no, I'm sorry, tier 2, then you are in an unsupervised role online with students, because you're, if I understand the tiers correctly, you're not with a teacher or a CPS employee at all times. So you answer those questions in your application, and for an arts partner, for the most part, there will always be insurance required. If you are simply, because it's a service rather than if you're just designing t-shirts for the 8th grade graduation, you're going to end up with no insurance required, and you'll just go right to the iSupplier approval process. If you're providing services, which I believe in general, that's the whole point of this, you will have insurance. And the minimum insurance will include the extra insurance that we, the board, has to buy for protecting students beyond general liability. And that type of insurance, we actually have another subcontractor who can sell the minimum requirements at a much lower price than if you went out on your own. However, it only works for us. We are only offering the lowest level of insurance that includes working with students to vendors who during the work with us. So just to kind of clarify, we attempt to support you along the way, but we can't do everything. So are there any questions about insurance? I saw some coming up in the chats that I probably couldn't read fast enough.
Yeah, we do have some questions, Ellen. Thanks so much for that. So a quick question is, do the insurance needs change between a tier 1 and a tier 2 partner?
Yes, my understanding of that, because I'm not, I look at all 4,500 active vendors, no matter what their tier is or department. My understanding of tier 1 is that there is student contact with a CPS employee at all times. And it's always via Google Meet, which is why I'm not going to assess any of our vendors' cyber liability unless you're using your own site. Like if you're using Zoom, then, well, you're not allowed to. So let's just talk about what you are allowed to do. And therefore, you're not having electronic interaction with us because we have a contract with Google and I have Google's insurance in place. So if you follow the rules, you don't need to provide extra insurance for the online piece. And it seems to me that the highest level, which most arts partners won't need, I think the highest level, as we've understood, is more for social emotional learning, for licensed psychologists to have conversations with students via Google Meet on their CPS vendor email address. So I think somebody put a comment in that they're already approved at tier 2. Maybe they should go back down to tier 1. So that's obviously a separate conversation. But we assess additional insurance if you're not supervised. So let's just talk about it. You know, you could be an arts partner who works with the teacher online or in person, and you'll have one set of insurance requirements. Or you could be an arts provider who does after-school programming independently of CPS employee being right by your side. I'm going to require extra insurance for that unsupervised at every moment conversation. And I'm not talking about supervision of a type 75 at the, in the front office. I'm talking about an employee with you at all times. Again, online or in person.
Great, that's helpful, Ellen.
Okay.
Thanks so much. We've got another question here about how a partner would know if their insurance is sufficient.
Well, as they go through that process, we have a third-party administrator, that yellow box I showed, which will review. What does your contract say? Or what does your letter of insurance requirement say if you're not board approved and you're going through sponsorship? And it's the job of that outside provider to say, yes, it meets and we accept it, or no, it doesn't meet, you have to fix it.
And can one also assume that if it's no longer sufficient, that they would be contacted to update their insurance or to, no?
No, unfortunately, we only know if it's insufficient if, first of all, if it's expired, and you would know if you're an active vendor and your insurance is expired, you're already out of compliance. And secondly, if your scope changes. That is the greatest call we're getting lately is we are no longer doing XYZ. So the trick is most insurance policies run for 12 months and none of us can predict what's happening 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months from now, let alone 12. So we have to err on the side of caution. If you're an art service provider, you're always going to need general liability and sexual abuse and molestation. And the sexual abuse is a protection for both the board and for the vendor employee, because false accusations can lead to lawsuits, which can lead to high expenses. And so insurance policies typically cover those false accusations.
So Ellen, would it be you or your team that a partner would be reaching out to ensure that they have the coverage that they need?
Sure. Obviously, we don't want 4,500 emails from all active vendors. If any of the vendors, arts vendors, are already active, we absolutely can. And if they have a board contract through the solicitation process from at any point, nothing has changed. Your insurance requirements are the same regardless. If you've been sponsored in the past and your scope has changed, for instance, maybe you're only providing art supplies now and not providing services, then yes, you can contact risk management, and I'll share in the chat an email address, and we will put you through what we call a new procedure called attestation. So we have onboarding, which is when you're becoming a new vendor, if you've been sponsored or if you got selected from a solicitation. And now we have a new procedure to put every 12 months, every active vendor will re-attest that everything's the same or something changed. It could be your tax ID changed. It could be your scope of services changed. It could be your email address that changed. So we have a new process that just started last month that we call attestation. Again, another lingo thing that we made up. And risk management could ask you to reattest your information via our iSupplier procedures.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And I'm not sure who would answer this one, but it seems that there are email reminders that are going out, and it's probably my guess from a lot of different places. So one of those reminders could be about the RFQ for the arts partners that's happening. Are there other reminders going out there? I guess are 2 deadlines that people are seeing, an October 23rd deadline and an October 31st deadline. Does this sound familiar?
It's definitely not risk, so I will mute now.
Yes, I'm not sure. Do you guys know who the email is coming from? Like, who is the sender?
Yeah, that's what I wasn't sure of either. So we'll circle back to Kathleen Beekman. That was your question. So drop that in the chat and we'll come back to you. In the meantime, we're going to move on. It sounds like it was coming from purchasing. Jasmine.
Thanks. I will have to check on that because if it's giving you the wrong deadline, I need to follow up on that.
Yeah.
We don't typically send out email reminders for open solicitations. FYI, we haven't sent one out for arts. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's related to a different project that, you know, the academic procurement team is not working on.
Yeah,
potentially.
Carissa, it's Ellen again. I see somebody clarified that, yes, all active vendors we have the machine automated to send at least 15 new emails each day to the active vendors who have been around the longest. So if you're receiving emails saying, we have a new procedure, you must go through attestation or you will be made automatically inactive, then you're getting reminders about it weekly. So,
Oh, okay. So that's through the vendor management team, right?
and for sure, once you go through attestation and you end up either getting approved through attestation with no insurance requirements, but again, for you guys, that's not likely. So you'll then get an insurance letter from Risk, and every week you're going to get another email. And we give people 30 days to get their insurance completed. And if you don't, then we will just reject you, and then you will become inactive.
That's super helpful. And this is why we're so glad to have all of you on together, because we know how complex the systems are. Okay, we're going to keep moving on and go next to the procurement methods.
Okay, so we get a lot of questions as to why or what exactly does a CPOR, RFP, or RFQ mean? And I'm just going to go over that really briefly. So basically, any purchase that exceeds $25,000, which is the spend limit that I covered or will be covering, procurement will step in and help assist the user department in preparing an appropriate, solicitation. The purpose of these methods is to engage in a competitive bidding for biddable goods or services, to invite competition and guard against favoritism, extravagance, fraud, and corruption. I've included our procurement's manual website link here below, which has tons of information about our procurement department and why we do what we do. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so bid is used for biddable items such as primarily goods or commodities, supplies, materials, or our construction projects. A CPOR is our informal solicitation used to receive quotes or proposals for non-biddable items. RFPs is used for non-biddable items, primarily, to select suppliers for our professional services. And our RFQ, which is request for qualifications, is used to pre-qualify suppliers to provide goods and services under the specifications of the scope. Next slide, please. Do we have any questions regarding to the methods that we currently use?
Okay, RFQs, RFPs, LMNOP, QRS, all of the different letters. Do we have any clarifying questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat just yet on that.
Okay.
And just a reminder, the current CPS Arts Partner strategic source vendor is for RFQ, request for qualifications. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide and section. Background checks, everybody's favorite topic, with Kimyata. Hi, Kimyata.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm Kimyata Dabney. I'm the Director of Background Check here with Chicago Public Schools, and I will give you a brief overview of the background check process here at CPS. So every vendor employee must have a successful background check. So they must be approved through the entire or comprehensive CPS background check process before working with our students. So all of this must happen before you get in front of our students. The CPS vendor or partner will receive information to set up an account with our fingerprinting vendor, who is currently Accurate Biometrics, in order to facilitate the background check process. Each partner is responsible for the cost of their employees. And I've provided a link, or a link has been provided here to go over the entire or comprehensive process. It's a six-pronged process. It includes an FBI check, FBI criminal history check, and Illinois State Police criminal history check. It also includes the national and statewide sex offender registries, Illinois State murder and violence against youth registries, a DCFS check, and it also includes a CPS records check about the eligibility for hire with Chicago Public Schools. But all of that information and all of the other details around the background check process are included in this link that's on the slide.
So great, Kenyatta. Drop your questions in the chat, folks, if you've got one for Kenyatta here. I've just got one. How often do the vendors need to go through the background check process?
So at the present time, when you begin with CPS, you have to get a background check. There is a refresh policy that has not formally been provided. It has not been formally shared. COVID-19 happened, and we did not roll that policy out as it had been planned. But as soon as that information is finalized, that information will be shared with vendors.
Great. This is an interesting question. I think one that is particularly illuminating with the kinds of work that we're doing because of COVID. But if an organization is working with a teaching artist, let's say, or somebody who is out of Chicago or out of the state of Illinois, working with an organization, I'm assuming they also need to complete a background check for that virtual teaching.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So local or not local doesn't matter.
There are processes and protocols in place for out-of-state vendor employees.
Okay, great. Awesome. I don't see any other questions here. So if we don't see anything, we're going to move on to our next section. Thanks, Kenyatta.
You're welcome.
Okay, spending limits.
Okay, so here's the famous spending limits I keep mentioning but haven't covered yet. So pretty much all vendors are subject to our procurement spending limits, which is $25,000 for total biddable or non-biddable services. Anything over 25 will require a fully executed board contract. We can go to the next slide. So here it is. Snapshot. School has a maximum spending limit of $25,000 that they can utilize without a contract, and anything over $25,000 will need a competitive procurement process, and a contract will be needed.
And when you say that, an example of what that is the current bid that is open for the CPS Arts Partner RFQ.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we have any questions on this section on the spending limits, clarification on spending? And that's, I'll ask a question. That spending limit, just to be crystal clear, is not your total spend across the district, but it's total spend by school, correct?
By school per vendor.
By
yes.
School per vendor per academic year.
Yes.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think we can go on to the next section.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be talking to you about the MWBE, minority participation, the remittal program, give you a little background on it and our process. Go to the next slide, please. So this is the OBD onboarding highlights. And before I begin, my name is Carla Shaw. I'm the compliance specialist with the Office of Business and Mercy at Chicago Public Schools. And what CPS does, our mission is committed to inclusion of MWBEs in its contracting practices. And the mission of our office is to ensure access to all procurement opportunities that the district is advertising, especially to minority and women-owned businesses. So if you're a for-profit and you are certified with governmental certifications, you will count as 100% on a contract. If you're not certified and you're a for-profit, we would look for you to get subcontractors on those contracts, if applicable, or you will have to fill out a waiver to state why you can't, there's no room for participation on any contract that you have with Chicago Public Schools. Our forms for the solicitations when they go out, our forms are 100 through 106. The remittal program contracts, the Board of Education Minority and Women-Owned Businesses program demonstrates the Chicago Public Schools' continued commitment to the success of minority and women-owned businesses. This program is governed by the revised remittal plan for minority and women-owned businesses enterprises. So we work with a B2G Now system to monitor our contracts as well. Non-for-profits are exempt from meeting the goals of the district, which are 30% MBE and 7% WBE, which this program was adopted in June of 2013. And if anyone has construction was adopted in December of 2011. You can go to the next slide. And this is what it is. So non-for-profits, like I said, are exempt. MWBE commitments are 30% MBE, 7% WBE. But if you're certified and hold governmental certifications, you count as 100% unless you choose to use a subcontractor on a contract, because there may be some services that you do not do and you source it out to a subcontractor and give them some form of percentage on that contract. The acceptable certifications that we accept in the city of Chicago is the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, Cook County. We accept governmental certifications that are out of state as well, but they have to be governmental. We do not at this time accept national certifications and veteran certifications. Even though it's great that you have those, we just currently do not accept those at this time. Is there another slide? So this is the certifications accepted governmental only. So it shows what we accept for the state of Illinois. But as I said, if you're currently out of state and you have those certifications, we accept governmental certifications from out of state. If you're a minority or woman-owned business and you're getting on a contract with CPS and you're looking to get certified, we will connect you with our business engagement manager. Her name is Thyteria Towns. She can help you through the process, tell you which website to go to and apply and things like that. So that's once you are granted a contract with us, we give you all the information that you need. We break down the forms thoroughly in every solicitation. We break down how to fill out the forms completely, our forms, so nobody have any mess ups or mistakes, and to understand those forms. And I also give you information to contact me if you need further help. And this is our compliance monitoring system. We use B2G Now. And this is how we monitor our contracts with our suppliers. All vendors are in here, but we monitor mostly our for-profits that are meeting the goals of the district, which is 30% MBE and 7% WBE, or they may be 100%, but they decide to give 10% to a supplier. So we just want to make sure that you are meeting the goals and you are in this system monitoring. But everyone can check in this system, their contracts, and to see what they've been paid from CPS. Are there any questions?
Great, great. Super helpful, Carla. Thank you. We've got a question about, even though nonprofits are exempt, do they still need to turn in certain forms on the RFQs and RFPs?
So yes, exactly. And I meant to say that. On the forms, non-for-profits only have to fill out 100 and 104. The other forms, they are exempt, or NA, because you are exempt, and right now there's no certification process for non-for-profits. So it's very crucial that you fill out 100, because a lot of times non-for-profits don't fill out any of the forms and they send them blank. But we do need 100 filled out and notarized, and we need form 104 because that's the vendor diversity profile sheet that breaks up your organization and gives us an idea of what your organization is. So everyone has to fill out the forms. Whatever don't apply, you put NA2, but for non-for-profits, the two main forms for you is 100 and 104.
Great, that's super helpful. Thanks for that clarification. We've got another great question here. So on Form 104, there's a question about, does your company have an established diversity program? And our Christina is wondering if that could include a formal diversity, equity, and inclusion board and staff committee?
It could, but that's to her discretion to say if she would want to put that on there.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Other questions? I think we're good on this section. Thank you so much. We're going to go on. Oh, wait, one more. And then for the industry chart, to complete that, we have to put all of our vendors our company has worked with on Form 104. Is that right?
No, 104 is the vendor diversity form. So that's the form that shows the makeup of your company or your organization only. When you work with suppliers like tier 2 subcontractors, you would put them on Form 100 and 101. I mean Form 101, not 100, Form 101, and then you would do a 103A, which is naming the subcontractor that you'll be using, which has to be notarized and signed by both of you. And then if you use an independent or a sole proprietor contractor, you would do that on Form 103B. So you have 103A and 103B. So it'd be 101 to list the subs you're using. And then you do a 103A single to each sub. And then a 103B for independent consultants and things like that.
I mean, that makes it easy, right? So many numbers. That's helpful. Thanks for that clarification. Great. Okay, I think we are going to now move on to the next slide. And we will get to the other questions that you're asking towards the end, but we want to keep pressing here to payment processing with Corey.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Bijou. I'm the accounts payable manager for the district. So here we have examples or the actual payment process laid out. The first 4 bubbles that you guys see on the screen are all tasks that are either completed by the schools or the actual units that are requesting services. What's critical here to note is that when the PO is created and submitted to the vendor, at that point in time is when the vendor can begin to gather those resources to complete the work or render said services. Do not, by any means, at any point in time, a vendor should never complete or deliver goods prior to being issued a purchase order. I can tell you of many occasions and many instances where vendors have reached out in regards to payment, but they did not have a PO created. Without that purchase order being created, there have not been funds obligated to pay you for your services. So if a school or unit reaches out, always ensure that you receive that purchase order first, and then these services or goods can be rendered afterward. Once those services or goods are delivered or rendered, you then submit your invoice to CPS invoice at cps.edu, and it begins the next payment chain. Go to the next slide. So, how to submit your invoice and ensure that payment takes place. You want to make sure that you have an active vendor number, and that is part of actually receiving a purchase order. You will not be able to be issued a purchase order without an active vendor number. Once you receive said purchase order and it's time for you to create your invoice, please be sure to include all of the verbiage and all of the items that we see in bullet point number 3 here. Attach one invoice per email that's submitted to CPS invoice, and be sure that you include the CPS issued purchase order number, a unique invoice number. Our system does not allow for duplicate entries. If you were to submit an invoice with a duplicate invoice number that you submitted in the past, it will fail validation and you will not be remitted your payment. Once you submit that invoice to CPS invoice, you can check the iSupplier module for status in regards to that invoice, and you should be good to go. If you have a valid CPS PO number and you submit your CPS invoice at cps.edu, there should be no issues or no reasons why payment is not remitted.
Okay, great. Thanks, Corey. We do have a couple of questions here. One is about just kind of a clarification. POs are created for no-cost agreements as well as with grants or funding that may be facilitated through CPS. So what does the invoice process look like if it's a no-cost agreement or a grant-funded program?
If it's a no-cost agreement, the vendor won't be able to have a PO open for them.
Okay.
That is correct. If it's a grant-funded item or services or goods, then a PO will be issued, and there will also be an additional line in that PO that states when those services or goods must be delivered by in order for us to take advantage of that grant funding.
Got it. And I think, Charlique, that question was yours, and I think that also answers the prior question you had about the potential Creative School Fund grants and how that plays. But if it hasn't done so, just drop another clarifying question in the chat. We've got another question here. Is the only way to get a PO is that the school has to request it themselves? Is that the only way to get a PO?
So POs can be, and the initial part or the initial requisition is created by either the school or the unit for whom they're attempting to have these services or goods rendered by. So they actually have to kick that process off. And once that process is kicked off, as we see that fifth bubble there, the PO is created and submitted to the vendor. And that is where you can actually take steps to actually render those services or issue those goods. If you have not received that PO, I highly advise that no services or goods are rendered until you have a PO in hand.
Great. Yep. So the school has to make that happen. Again, a running theme here for the session today. Okay. Are there other questions? Oh, we've got another one coming in here. So if a service has a PO, then they would actually, as the vendor, not be included as a no-cost agreement if they can't obtain a PO to get access to the funding. I'm not sure I understand this question.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So if a service has a PO, then they would actually not be included in a no-cost agreement if they can't obtain a PO to get access to the funding. Charlique, maybe this question's from Charlique. Charlique, do you want to unmute yourself? You may be able to express this better than I'm conveying it.
Hi, sure. I was just getting some clarity because I know the comment said that so for that funding, if we had the Creative School Fund that goes through the PO in order to receive the payment for the services. But I think one of the notes that was communicated just then, unless I misheard, was that no cost agreements don't receive POs or don't facilitate POs. So that I was just getting some clarity on that. So if we request funding through the Creative Schools Fund, and we are providing service, but it's in general a no-cost service, is it still considered a no-cost service if we're requesting funding through that?
So
I don't think so.
Yeah, so the determining factor as to whether or not you need a no-cost service agreement would be whether the funds are flowing through CPS. So if you're providing services and the funding is coming from outside of CPS and you want to work with the school, you will need to complete a no-cost service agreement to actually work with that school. If you expect payment from the school, you should not be completing a no-cost service agreement.
So Charlique, I think for the Creative School Fund, those funds are actually granted to the school. So the school would have to still go through the normal processing to get you paid as a vendor, which means POs and that process, I think would still be a normal process because the school is getting the funds directly. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Do we have other questions that we haven't answered? Okay, so we're gonna stick around for a few more minutes if something else catches your eye, but I'm gonna turn it over to Courtney for a few moments to talk about some other important upcoming events that you are going to want to know about.
Yes. Woo! Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to the procurement team for breaking down all of that information. It's a very complex system, so I found it very helpful for me. So hopefully this was helpful in clarifying some of the processes and procedures that you have to go through. So October is going to be a very fun and exciting month. So I just have a couple of announcements before everyone heads out. Coming up this Friday, October 9th, we have the All Partner Meeting taking place. And the All Partner Meeting is an annual meeting. It's an annual convening and a time to connect with the partner community, reflect on the current times, and align on our goals and initiatives for arts education in the sector moving forward here. So in addition to a welcome and keynote presentation with Shirley Chavadia, Chief of Teaching and Learning at CPS, you will also have the opportunity to attend several interactive breakout sessions with members of Ingenuity and hear important updates about the Creative Schools Fund and partnerships in professional learning, data and research, and advocacy. And then you'll also hear a little bit from the Department of Arts Education as well on some important updates and topics. So that should be really wonderful. Let's see, I'm going to drop a link into the chat so you can register for any upcoming events that I'm referencing here. So there we go, there's that. And then another event we have coming up this October is on the 22nd. It's this year's Fall Summit. It's going to take place virtually. And this is really a time for partners to connect with schools and form strategic partnerships. And so we're still committed to encouraging those partnerships this year. All partners have worked super hard on adapting their programs, so we're especially excited this time around. If once you register as a partner, you can, you'll be prompted to email me to more or less ask for or request a virtual booth. And through a virtual booth, you'll be able to interface with schools via a live video chat or through a chat box and share some branded content on your virtual booth page. So this is a really exciting opportunity to engage with partners in this virtual kind of setting. So we're really looking forward to that. And we'll also have some interactive breakout sessions at the summit as well. So if you didn't get a chance to attend the All Partner Meeting, hopefully you can still get some of those updates that you're looking for. So I think that's all from me. Those are our two major events. Thank you so much once again, everyone, for
And before we wrap it up, actually, we've got one more pressing question that I'm glad Tracy reminded me about. Tracy, the question from Tracy was about breakout rooms and the kind of permission level needed. As I understand, Google Classroom does not have a breakout room capability. And so in that way, you really shouldn't be using any breakouts. The district doesn't allow for Zoom as a platform. Is there anything that somebody from procurement wants to elaborate on with that, this kind of possible use of breakout rooms and tier status?
So that's my understanding as well. Google Meets does not have the breakout rooms. So we have that in Zoom, but you wouldn't be able to use Zoom.
You're not able to use it, right? So if you're using it in an like after school setting, that's kind of a different level, a different thing than the in school and during school day.
Can you repeat that, Nicole?
If you're doing this, for example, if you want to run a program after the school day and utilize Zoom for the after or out of school time services, can you do that?
Not that I know of. I think everything has to be Google Meets.
Okay, anytime we're working with students, we have to go through Google Meets.
For tier 1, yeah.
Great. Okay, hopefully, Christina, I hear you. Yes, hopefully Google Meets or Google is doing some breakout rooms soon. I know that a lot of teachers and a lot of partners are talking about that. So hopefully that is a coming update. So that's it from us. Again, like Courtney was saying before I so rudely interrupted her, thank you so very much to our friends in the Department of Procurement. This was incredibly helpful. Again, we'll have these slides available as well as the recording on the Ingenuity YouTube page and website probably next week. And also feel free to reach out to us if you got clarifying questions. We'll do our best to answer them. But thanks so much for attending today, and I hope you have a great, safe weekend. Take care now. Bye-bye.